Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon, and we're going to talk a little more about Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast and all the drama coming to tabletop. It seems like most of the conversations about tabletop gaming aren't about the games themselves, but all the politics around the tabletop gaming scene. And in particular, Wizards of the Coast, which has really doubled and tripled down on getting political current year. Now, it's been sort of a slow build up to where things are right now with Wizards, but we've seen a lot of changes being brought to Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering, and a lot of people getting canceled from the tabletop scene for wrongthink, and now apparently there's more problematic lore, and we'll talk about this because Wizards is really kind of doubling down on distancing itself from its roots, and it's unfortunate. I mean, things change, times change, obviously, tastes change, but this does seem to be, at least from my point of view, an effort to pander more and more to the Tumblr crowd that has kind of, co-opted tabletop in the last couple of years. I'm not talking about like, hey, we've got more people coming to tabletop. I'm talking about there's a certain kind of player that has come into the tabletop space, and they've literally pushed out, in some cases, the old school players. It's kind of the worst case scenario. People talk about gatekeeping and all of that, gatekeeping hobbies, and a lot of times I think it's blown out of proportion. Like, well, you don't need to exclude anyone from gaming, and I don't think you should. But sometimes you do have people come into a scene, and they basically take over, and push out the old heads, and literally in tabletop more than any other scene, including comics, including video games. I've seen more of this kind of reverse gatekeeping take place, where you have had a new group of players come in, a group of voices come in and influencers come in, and they have literally kind of taken over and pushed out the old heads and labeled old school gaming and gamers as being problematic. I know that Wizards of the Coast is in on this. I mean, they've even kind of poked fun at old gamers with Thaco the Clown and some other things, banning people, wrong thinkers from Gen Con. It goes on, and I'm just shocked. I mean, I'm shocked that all of this is going on. I didn't see it happening. I only paid any attention to this when I tried to get my own kids into tabletop, and I had not realized that Dungeons and Dragons had become so polarizing, that the tabletop scene had gotten so weird, and since I started looking into this, it's like, oh my God, people get banned from Gen Con for like any little thing. There's a lawsuit going on right now with Wizards of the Coast and the new TSR, which was reformed with some of the people involved with the original TSR. And the lawsuit now, again, I don't know if they have a case. I am not a lawyer. I don't know if they have a case, but their main complaint, as I understand it, is that they want Wizards of the Coast to take the disclaimer off of the old TSR modules. They still sell those modules via digital downloads. They still sell, different editions of books, whatever. And they put a disclaimer on basically saying that all of our old stuff is racist. And as I understand it, the current trademark owner of TSR would like Wizards of the Coast to remove that disclaimer. Whether or not they have to do that legally, I don't know. I have no idea. But they launched an Indiegogo for this, and they got immediate pushback. In fact, they got immediate pushback just for existing, because the scene is so locked down. But this was a couple of days ago, and they've since walked it back a little bit. Screen Rant puts up this big article. Of course, we've been talking about orcs being racist and drow being racist, and this conversation has been going on for 2 or 3 years now. It's the same group of people that are, all about Tolkien being racist and all that stuff. It's a new group of people, LARPers, Tumblr LARPers and cosplayers that have come into the scene. And look, I think gaming's for everybody. but I think it's also for people that you don't necessarily like or agree with. And, more and more, tabletop has become locked down, gate kept by people that complained about gatekeepers in the past. So we'll talk a little bit about this, that Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast was supposedly removing problematic lore with a new series of books, some changes made to potentially problematic content. Again, this is like once a month? Is it like the Demon of the Month Club? I joke that back in the day, in the 80s, D&D was the devil's game. In current year, D&D is the white devil's game. I mean, literally, it's like every other month there's another drama around D&D being racist or whatever, not inclusive enough. And I really gotta wonder, at what point in time is Hasbro going to get tired of it and just be like, you know what, we're just cashing out. We're cashing out. Let China, let Tencent deal with Wizards of the Coast, and we'll see how much they like it. Because it's going to be a totally different ball game under them. I don't know. Anyway, we'll talk about this. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. Over 247,000 subs, I think. Getting close to 250. If you could hit the subscribe button, help us out. It would be greatly appreciated. We're hoping to get to 250 by Christmas or New Year's. That'd take us to 250,000. It's so weird. I remember thinking, I wonder if we'll ever hit 5,000 subs. I wonder if we'll ever hit 10,000 subs. And it wasn't that long ago. It was only 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I'm like, man, the channel's just not really taking off. And then it just started to take off. It's crazy. Anyway, let's talk about this. This is the first part of it, because apparently they've walked this back a little bit. There was a lot of outrage coming from Screen Rant. And again, I found out about this via being tagged in by Twitter people who were outraged about everything. Sophia Norwitz is talking about gatekeeping being good. Gatekeeping is good until it's not good. Like I said, I think what's going on here is the people who complain the loudest about hobbies being gatekept got into a hobby, and then they played that Uno reverse card. Now they're the ones doing the gatekeeping. Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast removes problematic lore. From Screen Rant, Wizards of the Coast continues to excise potentially problematic content from Dungeons and Dragons to address issues of system racism. Or is that systemic racism? Wizards of the Coast is making a variety of changes to the Dungeons and Dragons books with the intent to remove lore deemed to be problematic. These are not the first changes made by Wizards of the Coast to address racism. No, it's like once a month. The last several years have seen many revisions to previously published Dungeons and Dragons books in the name of removing lore that enforces or has the potential to enforce negative racial stereotypes. We are talking about imaginary races in an imaginary world. And technically, the Dungeon Master can alter things to their choosing however they want. It doesn't need to be addressed in an official capacity, but of course it does, because Twitter will have a shit fit if it isn't. These stereotypes can be traced back to the roots of D&D with greedy dwarves, violent orcs, and evil dark elves. Any generalization about an entire race of people has the potential to be problematic. And Wizards of the Coast has begun walking back parts of their publications that could in any way be used to further such ideas. God forbid we have villainous races in Dungeons and Dragons. God forbid the orcs are bad just because they're bad. The dungeons, they're fictitious, right? We know this, right? Do they know these are fake? Like none of these things exist for real? I don't know. The Dungeons and Dragons community itself is divided as to whether or not the changes being made are for the best. Efforts made to address this systemic race are never a bad thing. Efforts made to address systemic race are never a bad thing, but many would rather see changes in how the company treats marginalized community members in real life, such as the Wizards of the Coast controversy with Orion Black, before making changes to the rules in their game. That actually is a very legitimate point. Let's make sure that people don't view orcs and drow as being racist caricatures, and let's treat our actual employees poorly. In Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Wizards introduced a new way of handling character race, allowing players to assign their innate ability score benefits to any scores they wanted, etc., etc. Yesterday, Wizards, well, this would have been a couple days ago, released a new Sage Advice by Jeremy Crawford with book updates to quite a few prior releases. Volo's Guide to Monsters being notably among them, as well as the Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. Many of these updates are simply to remove the default alignment label on all or almost all creatures in the Dungeons & Dragons universe. This is a trend. Monsters aren't bad. There's more and more of a call, and I don't know where this is coming from, but have like D&D without combat. Even though D&D technically started as a war game, now it's like, well, let's just kind of act our way out of a situation, which you can play that way if you want to. But some monsters just want to fuck you up. They do. And they need to die. Anyway, however, the changes that community members are less than pleased about are those that cut a substantial amount of lore text from several iconic D&D monsters, including Beholders, Mind Flayers, and Yuan Ti. The removal of this text prompted Green 3x3x3, a D&D player on Reddit, to post a write-up of all the excised lore. Beholder constantly fears for its safety, so we got Beholders, Giants. I'm not going to go into all this. But Giants, Gnolls, Beholders, Kobolds, Mind Flayers, Orcs, they're just misunderstood. Like here, most orcs have been indoctrinated into a life of destruction and slaughter. But unlike creatures who by their very nature are evil, such as gnolls, it's possible that an orc, if raised outside its culture, could develop a limited capacity for empathy, love, and compassion. Kinder, gentler orcs. Many D&D players are confused by WotC's choice to remove content regarding Beholders and Mind Flayers in particular, as the two races are categorically defined as aberrations in the game. Aberrations are typically otherworldly monstrous entities with very little in common with humanoids. The full change list is too extensive to address it in its entirety, but the general purpose remains mostly the same throughout. It could be said that the changes are unnecessary and do nothing but remove content and lore from the game. But it is important to remember that not everyone might feel that way. If making changes like this allows even a very small number of D&D players to feel safer or more comfortable with the content in the game, it should be considered. Feel safer. None of this shit is real. I'm just saying, none of this shit is real. Feel safer. Oh my God. Okay. So apparently they're trying to clarify it now. D&D explains recent book updates after online furor. It's only going to get worse, guys. You know this, right? Like once you start down this slippery slope of trying to appease Twitter, it never ends. It never ends. It's never enough. And at some point, Hasbro is going to have to decide whether or not it's worth it from a financial point of view. Is it worth chasing Twitter clout, or should we try to hold on to as many gamers as possible? Make some of these rules optional. Technically, all rules are optional. It depends on the campaign setting and your DM and how you want to play, right? Look at what is happening with Games Workshop. Their stock is dropping off a cliff. It's declined. I did a video on this a couple of days ago, and partially, it's because the stock market's not doing so hot, but partially it's because they were copyright striking fan channels and fan animations, and partially it's because they've been, issuing statements and trying to make sure they stay on the good side of the current regime in the tabletop scene. And they've been suffering for it financially. And I think the same thing is going to happen to D&D. I think D&D is split. I wouldn't even say split down the middle. I think that Hasbro, the current regime at Wizards of the Coast, is willing to throw away 2/3 of its fan base to chase that other third, the newer players that came in, 5, 6, 7 years ago. They're willing to do that. And a lot of other companies have done this, and it's been much to their detriment. But again, I don't know if they really care so much, because everything I've heard is that Hasbro is, again, seriously considering a sale. of Wizards of the Coast. It's been rumored for years, and they're going to cash out when they're going to get the best price for it. Right now, with D&D sales spiking because of the pandemic, because people are locked in their houses and they're playing more tabletop games, now would actually be a very good time to cash out. The thing is if, as rumored, if a Chinese company would buy Wizards of the Coast, well, China is really cracking down on its content guidelines. So all of this quote-unquote wokeness will go to the wayside if China gets a hold of Dungeons and Dragons. I'm just saying, that's a big if. I don't know what's going to happen. Right, but let's go out here. Comicbook.com, did D&D really purge their books of problematic lore? Of course not, but Wizards of the Coast still had to release an explanation for why it made several minor changes to several of its rulebooks. It's not that they make these changes. It's in a lot of cases is that they make such a big deal about it, and then they chastise players if they don't like the changes. The online Dungeons & Dragons communities exploded this week when Wizards of the Coast released several errata documents, making several changes to previously published books. Some of these changes were mechanical in nature, others removed bits of inadvertently insensitive material from past books, such as suggesting that villains should be given a stutter as a defining characteristic. However, some players were dismayed to learn that Wizards of the Coast had pared down bits of lore from Bolo's Guide to Monsters, a book that provided in-depth looks at popular monsters like Beholders, Mind Flayers, or UNT. The flavor text removed from books were role-playing suggestions that certain creatures uniformly behaved a certain way, such as knowing that gnolls have little variation in personality and outlook, or that a kobold acknowledges its weakness in the face of a hostile world. While many recognized that these changes were being made to avoid dealing in absolutes, that didn't stop some fans from claiming that D&D was purging their lore or sanitizing it of anything problematic. No, that's exactly what they're doing, because this isn't the first time. Like I said, this is often. Wizards of the Coast, within the last 2 years, has changed so many things about D&D. That it has gained mainstream attention. And that's not something that happens very often with D&D, unless it's like some big studio tie-in or something. But, even mainstream media outlets are kind of like, why are orcs racist again? Why are they purging this? Conversely, they're like, hey, it's about time. It's about time because, I was thinking back to when I played D&D that one time in 1983 that I thought to myself, I don't think these dwarves should be a racial stereotype. Are all dwarves grumpy? Probably not. The actual explanation has little to do with removing problematic content, more with recognizing that D&D's canon exists in a multiverse with a variety of different cultures. Oh God, what is it with the multiverse thing? This has become the new reboot, right? A couple of years ago, every freaking superhero movie was being rebooted. Now every freaking superhero movie exists in a multiverse. So studio lead Ray Winninger wrote an update on their website yesterday explaining some of the changes made to various D&D rulebooks. I previously noted that new setting products are a major area of focus for the studio going forward. As part of that effort are reminders that D&D supports not just the Forgotten Realms, but a multitude of worlds are getting more explicit. Since the nature of creatures and cultures vary from world to world, we're being extra careful about making authoritative statements about such things without providing appropriate context. Now, that is true. I mean, look at Dragonlance compared to the Forgotten Realms, compared to Greyhawk. Even back in the day, there were differences, between the way that some races and monsters were dealt with or how they behaved. And again, that's inherent to any campaign that you run. Your characters, your races, whatever, will probably differ somewhat from the official rule book, because you're going to kind of make it up as you go. And that was part of the fun of D&D. But again, the fact that Wizards has to continuously address this, in an official capacity, when before it was like, I don't think all orcs should be racist. Well, then fine, make some orcs that aren't racist for your game at your table. That's all you got to do. Why do we have to address this? Oh, yeah, because it makes Twitter happy. Dungeons & Dragons fans can rest easy knowing that Mind Flayers still want to eat their characters' brains. This is silly. Guys, you're just being silly. Well, no, it's Again, something that is indicative of a larger issue. Old school players are bad. It's all about chase and tumbler, and good luck with that. I mean, look, their sales are through the roof. I can't say that it's really hurting their sales, but at some point in time, I think that that's going to taper off. And the thing is the crowd that they're chasing, they will eat your brains. You know, they are clout eaters. They will absolutely turn on you. They will turn on you at the drop of a hat, for sure. And you will find yourself being canceled for some dumb shit you didn't do right this week. They'll dogpile you, call for boycotts, run to their friends, the journalists, and try to smear your company's name. That's just how this game is played, and for them, it is a game. I think it is a game. I think it's all a game. They're trying to take scalps, get points, social clout, and if it means throwing your company under the bus for wrongthink or employees at your company under the wheels of the bus, they'll absolutely do it. This is who you're courting now, so it's never going to be enough. Anyway, I've rambled enough. I'm going to wrap this one up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.